They say the quietest storms can unleash the fiercest winds, and in the small farming town of Thornwood, a storm was brewing. When 12-year-old Kofi, the son of a humble black farmer, was cruelly expelled by an arrogant teacher, no one suspected what would happen next. The day after his humiliating dismissal, a thunderous roar shattered the tranquility of the schoolyard. An unexpected helicopter landing changed everything. This is the gripping tale of pride, prejudice, and powerful revelations that shook a community to its core, proving that no seed of cruelty goes unharvested. Prepare to witness a story of drama, redemption, and hard-learned lessons, nestled in the rolling fields of rural Thornwood. Redwood Middle School had once been revered as a respectable institution. It wasn't prestigious in the sense of a private academy, but it had earned a modest reputation for dedicated faculty and a tradition of academic competitions. The front lawn was dotted with elegant oak trees that provided shade for the children during lunch breaks, and the worn brick walls bore the marks of countless years of bustling student life. During harvest season, a sweet earthy smell drifted through the air, a constant reminder of the farmland that sustained Thornwood's economy. Most of the students came from families who worked the fields. Some owned large properties, while others toiled from sunrise to sunset as seasonal laborers. Yet Redwood prided itself on community values on the surface, at least. It was the start of a new school year, and the air practically hummed with anticipation. Among the new faces in the 7th grade hallway was Kofi Tour. Slender and a bit shy, Kofi had recently transferred after his family moved to Thornwood from a smaller neighboring township. His father, Robert Toure, was a hard-working farmer who specialized in growing various vegetables and raising free-range chickens. Though African-American, with paternal roots tracing back to Ghana, Kofi's family had lived in rural parts of the state for generations. They cultivated a proud legacy of working the land, respecting nature, and encouraging their children to see dignity in every job. No matter how humble, Kofi stepped off the old green school bus on his first day, heart pounding in nervous excitement. His father had just dropped him at the bus stop with a hug and gentle words of encouragement. The buzz of other kids comparing schedules, cliques forming in corners, and teachers hustling to welcome or corral the new classes felt like a chaotic whirlwind. But Kofi was determined to make a good impression, get good grades, and maybe even join the science club or the soccer team. Inside Redwood's main hall, a tall trophy case reflected the bright morning sun. Placed prominently was a plaque from John Deere commemorating the school's long-standing partnership with the famous agricultural machinery company. Every year, John Deere sponsored Redwood Middle School's agricultural science fair and donated supplies. Kofi lingered a moment, looking at the shining brass letters of a brand he recognized from his father's tractor at home. It filled him with a brief sense of excitement. Farming was a respected tradition here, right? Yet, as he soon discovered, not everyone in Thornwood believed that all farmers or all children should be valued equally. Some staff members' kindness ran only surface deep. Though Redwood Middle had a good reputation, one teacher's rigid ideas would test the moral foundation of the school and the entire community. Kofi had no idea that he was about to become the catalyst for a series of events that would shake Redwood Middle School to its very core. Before moving to Thornwood, the Toures lived in a smaller town called Mapleton, where Robert had leased farmland. Their harvests had been bountiful, but after a series of storms devastated much of the land, Robert decided to move closer to his father-in-law's estate. He hoped this closer proximity would not only help him manage finances, but also give Kofi better educational opportunities. Kofi's mother, Anita, had passed away when he was very young. She had been a nurse with a tender heart, always encouraging him to remain curious about the world. Though Kofi's memories of her were faint, he carried her warmth within him. Robert, a proud yet gentle soul, kept the family afloat through adversity. He often reminded Kofi, "We may not have much, but we have our name and our hard work." Every day before sunrise, Robert would rise, put on his work boots and tread into the fields, determined to keep food on the table and a future for his son. What Kofi didn't fully comprehend was that his paternal grandfather, Joseph Toure, was far wealthier than most would guess. Joseph had invested shrewdly in real estate, agricultural ventures, and even a few high-tech startups in the city. But he despised showing off, preferring to dress plainly and keep his fortune discreet. He was proud of his heritage, proud of the farmland that had shaped his ancestors, but also aware of how prejudice lurked in unexpected corners. So he chose humility over ostentatious displays of wealth. When Robert decided to move to Thornwood, Joseph quietly lent him the funds to lease better farmland. He also aided in purchasing a newer, albeit used, John Deere tractor. Kofi's father insisted on repaying every cent in time. It was a matter of pride. Even though Joseph was well off, Robert felt it was important to set an example for his son, to show him that every advantage in life should be earned, not merely inherited. Despite the veneer of a close-knit farming community, Thornwood carried its own undercurrents of social division. The local high rollers, wealthy landowners who owned multiple expansive farms, viewed smaller farmers with either pity or contempt. Their children often formed exclusive friend circles at Redwood Middle School, and teachers sometimes showed favoritism to the more affluent students. Robert felt uneasy about these dynamics, but he tried to reassure Kofi. "Keep your head high, son. Your heart is pure, and your mind is capable. If you stay focused, you'll find real friends. You'll shine on your own merit." Kofi sensed the tightness in his father's voice, the fear that prejudice might overshadow his son's opportunities. But Kofi was determined. He studied diligently at home, helped his father feed the chickens, watered the kale and collard greens, and read every book he could get his hands on. His father had introduced him to the writings of Booker T. Washington and Maya Angelou, works that fed his imagination and sense of self-worth. Neither father nor son expected the storm that was about to break. Under Redwood's sturdy roof, a single teacher's bias would explode into a dramatic confrontation that would test the Toure family's resilience like never before. In Redwood Middle School's staff lounge, the teachers were settling into the new academic year. Among them was Mr. William Strickland, a tall, imposing man with a rigid bearing. He stood out for his immaculate attire, starched shirts, polished shoes, and a well-worn scowl that rarely turned into a smile. Rumor had it that he had tried and failed multiple times to secure a job at a prestigious private school in the city. Whether it was disappointment or something deeper, he wore his bitterness like armor. Mr. Strickland taught English and social studies to 7th graders. He was known for running a strict classroom where any infraction, no matter how small, was met with stern warnings. Students whispered about his unpredictability. Some days he'd be calm, explaining grammar rules with meticulous detail. Other days, a student's mild question could spark a harsh lecture about entitlement or laziness. Yet Redwood's principal, Mrs. Ortega, admired his attention to discipline. She believed that a firm hand kept students in line, and parents praised good test scores, so few questioned his methods. From the day Kofi walked into Mr. Strickland's classroom, tensions were quietly brewing. Strickland took note of Kofi's well-worn sneakers and the calluses on his hands' marks of farm work, Kofi was quiet and respectful, but his occasional daydreaming or momentary stumbles in grammar exercises seemed to trigger Mr. Strickland's ire more than with other students. Whenever Kofi would ask for clarification, Mr. Strickland would offer a curt response. "Pay attention, boy, and you wouldn't be lost." Subtly, the teacher's eyes would narrow, a faint sneer on his lips. Kofi tried not to let it get to him. He tried to maintain good posture, take meticulous notes and volunteer answers when he felt certain. But the sense of being under extra scrutiny gnawed at him. Other classmates noticed too. A kind girl named Lisa whispered to him after class, "Don't let Mr. Strickland discourage you. You're smart, Kofi." A couple of boys, noticing Kofi's discomfort, teased him lightly about being the teacher's new target. While they meant no real harm, it only made Kofi more self-conscious. Still, Redwood had its share of supportive teachers. Miss Palmer, the science teacher, appreciated Kofi's inquisitiveness, especially about plant biology. She saw a spark in him that reminded her of why she loved teaching. Ms. Palmer encouraged him to join the upcoming science fair. Kofi was excited, but nervous. Participating would mean extra hours of study and some materials cost which he didn't want to burden his father with. Yet Miss Palmer assured him that scholarships were available for promising students, unbeknownst to Kofi. Mr. Strickland harbored a deep-seated resentment. Perhaps it was Kofi's quiet confidence, or maybe it was the boy's heritage that triggered old prejudices. Maybe it was the teacher's own dissatisfaction with life that made him lash out at those he deemed less deserving. Whatever it was, Mr. Strickland's hostility was becoming evident, an unspoken threat that would soon escalate beyond control. One crisp October morning, Mr. Strickland assigned a group project on the civil rights movement. He split the class into pairs and distributed topics that ranged from Rosa Parks to the Freedom Rides. Kofi was paired with a boy named Jake, whose father owned one of the largest dairy farms in Thornwood. At first, Jake seemed friendly enough, but as they got deeper into research, Kofi noticed a strained politeness in his partner's demeanor. Jake's father was rumored to hold strong biases, and it appeared some of that had seeped into Jake's worldview, despite Redwood's attempts at inclusive teachings. They were given a week to prepare a presentation on the Greensboro sit-ins. Kofi dove into the library searching for articles, photos, and personal testimonies. He wanted to understand the passion behind those protests. How young black college students sat at a segregated lunch counter, bravely demanding to be served as equals. Jake, meanwhile, seemed more interested in writing a few bullet points and letting Kofi handle the majority of the research. When Kofi gently suggested they share the workload, Jake balked. "Look, man, I'm busy. My dad's making me train for the junior rodeo competition. Just do your part, and I'll do mine," he said, with a dismissive shrug. Reluctantly, Kofi did most of the project alone. On presentation day, he stood at the front of the class, heart pounding. He had spent nights rehearsing lines, gathering powerful images, and crafting a thoughtful narrative about the historical significance of the Greensboro sit-ins. Jake arrived with a single flashcard and mumbled a few lines before stepping aside, leaving Kofi to carry the rest of the presentation. The class listened quietly, and a few students nodded in appreciation at the images of defiance and courage Kofi presented. Yet Mr. Strickland stood at the back of the classroom, arms folded, face frozen in a cold stare. When Kofi finished, the teacher cleared his throat. "Your research is thorough, but next time try to keep your personal biases out of it. We're studying history, not rewriting it," he said, a scornful edge in his tone. Kofi's cheeks burned in confusion. He had stuck strictly to historical fact, weaving in direct quotes. He hadn't inserted any personal opinions beyond highlighting the bravery and significance of the protests. To Kofi's surprise, Mr. Strickland gave the pair a B. The teacher's rationale was that the presentation lacked objective analysis and seemed politically charged. Jake merely shrugged and walked away, unconcerned about the grade. But Kofi felt stung. He had poured his heart into this. He suppressed the resentment brewing inside him, telling himself, "This is only one project, I'll do better next time." But Mr. Strickland wasn't finished. He began to single Kofi out more frequently, calling on him in class to answer tricky questions, scrutinizing his papers with unusual vigor, and making subtle remarks about lazy farm kids who can't keep up with city expectations. Over time, the tension grew more pronounced. Kofi tried to keep his head down, but it was only a matter of time before the situation exploded in the most public way possible. 2 weeks later, Redwood Middle School was buzzing with excitement over the upcoming Thanksgiving assembly. Students were busy preparing for performances, and the halls echoed with laughter and music rehearsals. Kofi was looking forward to the break from academics. His father promised they'd spend some time together, repairing a section of their chicken coop and maybe going fishing. In Mr. Strickland's class, the tension had reached a boiling point. That Monday, Kofi walked in a few minutes before class to find the teacher glaring at him. "You're late," Mr. Strickland snapped, though the bell hadn't rung yet. Kofi glanced at the clock. He was actually early by 2 minutes, but he chose to stay silent. Moments later, chaos ensued. The loud crack of a thrown textbook jolted the class. Mr. Strickland whirled around, eyes darting to Kofi. "Was that you?" he hissed. Kofi froze, hands empty. He hadn't moved from his seat. Several students tried to speak up, but Mr. Strickland silenced them with a bark. Quiet, I know troublemakers when I see them. It turned out that a cluster of rowdy boys in the back had been playing around, tossing a textbook to each other. But in the swirl of motion, Mr. Strickland chose to blame Kofi. Although some classmates whispered that Kofi was innocent, the teacher insisted that Kofi had disrupted his classroom. "Get out!" Mr. Strickland seethed, pointing to the door. Kofi's voice trembled. "But I didn't do anything, sir." "That's enough. I won't tolerate disrespect or lying in my room." Mr. Strickland's face hardened into a rageful mask. He scribbled furiously on a piece of paper and thrust it at Kofi. "This is your expulsion notice from my class. Gather your things and leave now. I'll have a formal recommendation for the principal by the end of the day." The room fell silent. A hot flush of shame and confusion washed over Kofi. Expulsion. For simply being present when a textbook was thrown, Kofi swallowed, looked around at his classmates for support, but found only wide-eyed stares. Some of the braver students tried to speak on his behalf, but Mr. Strickland wouldn't hear it. "All of you take out your notebooks, or you can follow him out the door," he threatened. His legs shaky, Kofi grabbed his backpack and left the classroom. He walked down the corridor, heart pounding in his ears, tears welling up in the corners of his eyes. Expulsion from Mr. Strickland's class practically meant expulsion from Redwood. Middle, Strickland had enough sway with the administration to get the boy kicked out. Kofi took a deep breath and marched to the principal's office. Head held low. Principal Ortega was perplexed when she heard the allegations. Strickland had already emailed her a scathing report, labeling Kofi as a consistent disruption and dishonest troublemaker. With a tight-lipped expression, she told Kofi that until further notice, he was suspended. She needed time to investigate the matter. Kofi felt the world spin around him. As he stepped out of the office, carrying the weight of an unjust decision, he had no inkling of the unstoppable chain of events that would follow, or the roar of helicopter blades that would soon echo over Redwood's yard. News traveled fast among the students and faculty. By lunchtime, whispers filled the cafeteria. "Did you hear Kofi got expelled?" Mr. Strickland lost it again. "That's not fair. Kofi's the nicest kid in class." But Redwood Middle School's disciplinary policies, shaped largely by the old-fashioned ethos of the district, left little room for immediate recourse. Principal Ortega wanted to avoid conflict. She believed in supporting her faculty's authority and rarely reversed a decision without substantial evidence. Kofi slumped in a bench outside the main office, waiting for his father to arrive. He braced himself for Robert's reaction. When Robert finally rushed in, wearing his worn farm overalls and boots caked with dried mud, he looked bewildered and angry. "Kofi, are you all right?" he asked, his voice trembling with concern. Kofi nodded, too emotional to speak. Principal Ortega appeared, took Robert aside, and explained that a formal letter of suspension, possibly leading to expulsion, would be sent out later that day. She cited repeated complaints from Mr. Strickland about Kofi's disciplinary issues. Robert's face tightened. What disciplinary issues, he demanded, raising his voice in a way Kofi had rarely heard. "My son's never been in trouble before." Ortega maintained a diplomatic tone. "I understand your concern, but Mr. Strickland claims Kofi disrupted class multiple times. We must ensure the learning environment remains stable for all students." She handed Robert a form with a list of alleged misdeeds, most of which were news to both father and son. Robert's eyes darted over the accusations, turning red with disbelief, insubordination, refusal to follow instructions, hindering classmates' ability to learn. It was a litany that made little sense. Kofi's classmates began to circle in the hallway, hoping to catch a glimpse of the unfolding drama. Robert looked at their faces. Some nodded sympathetically, others watched with mild curiosity. He pulled Kofi close and turned to Principal Ortega. "I am not signing anything until I speak to a lawyer, or at least until we have a proper meeting to discuss my son's side of the story." Principal Ortega's eyebrows shot up. Legal involvement was a headache she did not want to entertain. "Of course, Mr. Torre. We can set up a meeting, but for now, Kofi is suspended, effective immediately." Kofi felt tears pooling. He had never seen his father so furious. Robert's knuckles were turning white from gripping the suspension form too hard. There was a quiet strength in him as he faced Principal Ortega. "We'll be back," he said, voice resolute. With that, Robert led Kofi out the front doors. During the ride home in Robert's old pickup truck, a heavy silence filled the air. Kofi stared at the passing farmland through the window. He tried to piece together the scenario logically, but all he felt was shame, anger, and a creeping doubt about whether Redwood Middle was truly a place he belonged. Little did he know that by the next morning, Redwood's campus would be the stage of a spectacle no one had anticipated. For sometimes, it takes a grand, unstoppable gesture to expose hidden injustices and set the record straight. The dawn sky over Thornwood wore the soft pink hues of sunrise. Redwood Middle School's teachers arrived as usual, coffee thermoses in hand, discussing lesson plans and holiday breaks. Principal Ortega was in her office early, preparing for a staff meeting about disciplinary procedures. Meanwhile, Kofi and his father had spent the night on the phone with various relatives, recounting the day's shocking events. Word reached Joseph Torre, Kofi's grandfather, in a city 2 hours away. Joseph listened quietly as Robert vented his frustration, detailing every injustice that had unfolded. The silence on the other end of the line was telling a deep, smoldering quiet that signaled Joseph was thinking carefully about his next move. At Redwood Middle School, the morning bell rang. Students shuffled through the hallways, still buzzing about Kofi's suspension. A handful of them were determined to clear his name. They were outraged at the teacher's actions. Others shrugged it off, more interested in the upcoming Thanksgiving break in Mr. Strickland's classroom. A triumphant air hung around him. He went about his morning routine with a smug look, believing he had rid himself of a so-called disruptive influence. Then, just past 9:00 a.m., a distant rumble grew in volume. Heads turned toward the windows. The unusual sound filled the hallways, overshadowing the hum of everyday school chatter. Teachers poked their heads out of classrooms, exchanging puzzled glances. Students pressed their noses against windows. The rumble escalated to a roar, and in the next breath, a large helicopter came into view, descending toward the school's soccer field. Within minutes, Redwood Middle School was in an uproar. Principal Ortega rushed outside, flanked by security staff and a few wide-eyed teachers. The helicopter door slid open, revealing a tall, dignified figure in a tailored suit. Joseph Toure. His silver hair and calm demeanor radiated a quiet authority. He stepped onto the grass as the helicopter's blades continued to whip the air, sending dust and leaves swirling in a spectacle that left onlookers gaping. Alongside Joseph stood 2 lawyers and a stern-faced associate who carried a thick binder of documents. The group strode toward the school's entrance, exuding confidence. Mr. Strickland was at his classroom window, watching the scene unfold, a sinking feeling pooling in his stomach. He sensed that his hold on the situation was about to unravel in a very public way. Students and staff crowded around some filming with their phones. Joseph paused before them, scanning the faces until he located a security guard. "I'd like to speak to Principal Ortega immediately," he said, his voice carrying the weight of unwavering resolve. Word spread like wildfire. Kofi's grandfather had arrived by helicopter, a shocking twist in an otherwise predictable day. No one knew exactly what he planned to do, but the tension was palpable. The walls of Redwood Middle seemed to tremble with anticipation of the confrontation that was about to take place, and in that moment many realized that the lines between right and wrong, truth and lies, were about to be redrawn on a scale none of them had expected. In the principal's office, the air was thick with unease. Joseph Toure and his associates sat across from Principal Ortega, who attempted to maintain her composure behind the polished oak desk. Robert Toure stood to one side, arms folded, while Kofi sat quietly, his eyes shifting between his grandfather and the principal. Mr. Strickland had been summoned to join them, his expression a mixture of indignation and dread. Joseph's voice was measured as he spoke. "Ms. Ortega, I'm here to address the unjust treatment of my grandson, Kofi Toure. He's been accused of misconduct without proper evidence. I'd like to see any and all documentation related to these claims." One of Joseph's lawyers handed over an official-looking request form, citing educational regulations and Kofi's rights. Principal Ortega fumbled briefly before sliding a file across the desk. "Mr. Toure Redwood has a policy," she began, but Joseph raised his hand politely to stop her. "I'm aware of your policies. We'll be reviewing them, and we demand a fair hearing for Kofi. All we ask is that the truth be established." His calm voice belied the steely determination in his eyes. Mr. Strickland cleared his throat. "I maintain that the boy was continually disruptive," he said, failing to fully mask a quiver in his voice. "Our classroom environment was suffering. I had a responsibility to uphold order." One of Joseph's lawyers opened the thick binder he carried. "We have signed statements from over a dozen students confirming that Kofi was not the one throwing the textbook. They also describe repeated instances of you singling him out and belittling him. This suggests a pattern of targeted harassment." Strickland's face paled. Principal Ortega looked stunned. She glanced at Robert Toure, who gave her a curt nod. "We spoke to Kofi's classmates last night," Robert explained. "We went to their homes, Their parents were shocked to learn the accusations being leveled against him. Joseph locked his gaze on Strickland. Let's be clear, if this is a case of prejudice, masquerading as discipline, we will not stand for it. My grandson deserves the same fair treatment as every other student. At that moment, Miss Palmer, the science teacher, knocked on the office door. She had heard about the meeting and felt compelled to speak up. Ortega signaled her to enter. Palmer, clutching a folder, began, "Principal Ortega, I've had Kofi in my class. He's diligent, respectful, and passionate about learning. These accusations don't align with the student I know. In fact, I've repeatedly witnessed Mr. Strickland admonishing him for trivial matters." A hush fell over the room. Mr. Strickland's bravado was evaporating under the intensity of the scrutiny. Sensing the shift, Principal Ortega offered a tight smile. "It appears there's more to this situation. Let us carefully investigate these new statements." Mr. Tour Joseph inclined his head. "I appreciate that. But let me be perfectly clear. If Kofi's suspension is not lifted promptly, and if he has not provided a welcoming environment to continue his education, we'll be taking legal action." The finality in Joseph's tone sent a clear message. Redwood Middle School's hierarchy was on notice. And for Mr. Strickland, the ramifications of his actions were suddenly far more serious than he had ever anticipated. The school day continued in a state of suspended animation. In hushed groups, students swapped rumors about Kofi's grandfather, and the dramatic office showdown, Mr. Strickland returned to his classroom, visibly shaken, and his usual stern aura had cracked into nervous tension. A few students, emboldened by the swirling rumors of a legal challenge, dared to meet his eyes with defiance during the lesson. He struggled to maintain his composure, launching into stammered explanations of textbook passages. While ignoring the stares, word soon spread beyond the school walls and into the Thornwood community. Parents discussed the incident at the grocery store and the post office, their voices tinged with curiosity and sometimes gossip. Some expressed outrage at the alleged racial discrimination, while others rushed to defend Mr. Strickland, insisting that a single teacher shouldn't be labeled as prejudiced without due process. The helicopter incident, however, was undeniable proof that the Tour family was far more influential than anyone had guessed. Robert tried to carry on with his farm work, but each phone call or text message reminded him that the scandal had become town-wide news. He worried about the effect on Kofi's mental health. At home, Kofi quietly studied, uncertain about whether he would be allowed to return to Redwood. He felt a strange mixture of relief, knowing many classmates supported him, and anxiety about what the final outcome would be. Joseph remained calm and methodical, calling in favors and tapping into his extensive network. He arranged for a local reporter from the Thornwood Tribune to interview him about the broader issue of fairness in schools. While Joseph didn't want to exploit the situation for publicity, he believed shining a public light on Redwood's disciplinary practices might help Kofi and others who had faced unjust treatment. The reporter, Nancy Wu, arrived at the Toure farm one evening, took notes on the situation, and promised to publish a balanced article. Mr. Strickland, meanwhile, felt the ground shifting under his feet. He had always prided himself on his strict but fair persona, but with multiple student statements contradicting his claims, the teacher was losing credibility. Fast. Fear of termination, or worse, a public lawsuit gnawed at him. He spent sleepless nights drafting letters of explanation, hoping to defend himself by citing vague past incidents where Kofi had failed to follow instructions. Yet even he knew the evidence was thin. At the same time, Redwood Middle's administration was forced to review its own practices. The question arose: how many other students had been unfairly disciplined or received questionable treatment Principal Ortega scrambled to maintain order, scheduling emergency meetings with district officials. She tried to appease Joseph Toure, but she also had to contend with the realities of a possible court case if the matter wasn't resolved quickly. A sense of reckoning had gripped Thornwood. Kofi Toure's case was no longer just about one student and one teacher. It was about how this small farming community would confront the shadows of bias and the responsibilities educators bear toward every child. That evening, Joseph Toure sat on the porch of Robert's farmhouse, gazing out over the moonlit rows of collard greens and corn. Kofi joined him, tentatively taking a seat on the porch step. They were alone, the hustle of farmland chores done for the day, the house quiet except for the hum of crickets. Grandpa, Kofi said softly, "I never expected you to fly in like that." Joseph smiled. "I never intended to either. But sometimes situations demand a statement that can't be ignored. I want you to understand something. Kofi, wealth doesn't make a person better than anyone else, but it can be a tool to ensure we're treated with respect when others try to deny it." Kofi nodded slowly. "I know Dad always taught me to work hard and earn my place. And he's right," Joseph continued. "But there are moments when prejudice clouds people's judgments. You've done nothing wrong, Kofi. Yet you've been singled out by someone who can't see beyond his own biases. My display today wasn't just about defending you. It was about showing the world that we won't stay silent in the face of injustice. Understand?" Kofi swallowed. "Yes, Grandpa. I wish it hadn't come to this. I liked Redwood before all this happened." Joseph's gaze rested gently on his grandson. "I know you did, and I'm not here to destroy the school. But I'm here to make sure that people like Mr. Strickland learn they can't abuse their authority. And if it helps change the system, so no other child goes through what you did, then that's all the better." After a moment of reflective silence, Kofi spoke again. "Thank you, Grandpa. I'm worried about Dad, though. He's so stressed. He works so hard. And now this lawsuit threat or whatever it is." Joseph placed a comforting hand on Kofi's shoulder. "Your father is strong. He's proud of the life he's built for you." "Yes, it's stressful, but it's also our duty as men of this family to stand up for what's right. We do it not out of anger, but out of love for ourselves and for those who come after us." Their conversation lingered on the porch for another hour, spanning family history, the significance of education, and the resilience that had carried the Toure lineage through generations of farming and perseverance. Kofi soaked in every word. He realized that the unstoppable force behind his grandfather's actions was not just money, but a lifetime of wisdom, shaped by experiences of discrimination, heartbreak, triumph, and an unwavering commitment to justice. By the time they turned in for the night, Kofi felt stronger. He understood that standing up for oneself didn't mean discarding humility. It meant ensuring no one stepped on your dignity. And when you had allies willing to land a helicopter in your defense, it was a powerful reminder that you were never alone in the fight against injustice. Early the next morning, Redwood's corridors were quieter than usual. Students sensed that something significant was about to happen. The tension that had been simmering reached a new level when Principal Ortega announced an emergency assembly in the auditorium. By mid-morning, the student body and teachers gathered, a nervous hum in the air. Principal Ortega, wearing a grave expression, took the podium. "We have become aware of serious allegations concerning the treatment of one of our students, Kofi Toure. It is Redwood Middle School's policy to investigate such matters thoroughly. She cleared her throat. It has come to our attention that disciplinary actions were taken without sufficient evidence, and multiple accounts indicate potential bias. A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mr. Strickland stood on the far side of the stage, visibly tense, flanked by a couple of administrators. Ms. Palmer was near him, her arms crossed protectively over her chest. Kofi and Robert sat in the front row, Joseph beside them, wearing an expression of composed gravity. "This is a serious matter," Ortega continued. "Mr. Strickland, we have decided to place you on administrative leave pending further investigation. We will be reviewing your conduct thoroughly with the district board." A hush fell over the auditorium. For a moment, Mr. Strickland looked as though he might protest, but with so many witness statements and the threat of legal repercussions, he bit his tongue. His eyes darted to Kofi, flickering with a mix of resentment and fear. Principal Ortega turned toward Kofi. "On behalf of Redwood Middle School, I want to publicly apologize to you, Kofi, for any harm caused. Your suspension is lifted, effective immediately. You're welcome to return to your classes as you see fit." Some students cheered quietly, others clapped. A few teachers nodded in approval. It felt like a small step toward justice. Yet Joseph eyed the principal carefully. He knew the real measure would be how Redwood changed going forward, not just a perfunctory apology. In the parking lot after the assembly, Mr. Strickland, flanked by a district lawyer, approached Robert and Kofi. There was an awkward pause before Strickland cleared his throat. His voice was subdued, deflated. "I want to say, I'm sorry if my actions were misunderstood. It was never my intention." To Robert's face hardened. "I think you owe my son a direct apology." Strickland glanced at Kofi, eyes shifting with discomfort. "Kofi, I apologize for any upset I've caused you. I hope we can move past this." Kofi blinked, uncertain how to respond. Part of him wanted to lash out, to say you ruined my school life. But the calmer, more reflective side recognized that holding on to anger wouldn't heal anything. He nodded, accepting the apology quietly, though he couldn't quell the sense of lingering mistrust. As Mr. Strickland walked away, Joseph stepped closer to his grandson. "Reconciliation is important, Kofi, but so is accountability. We'll ensure Redwood follows through with deeper changes." Kofi nodded, feeling a sense of relief that justice had at least partially been served. A question lingered, though would Redwood truly transform, or would Mr. Strickland's removal be just a temporary bandage on a deeper wound? In the weeks that followed, an internal investigation by the school district confirmed Mr. Strickland's pattern of biased behavior, not just toward Kofi, but toward several other minority students over the years. Multiple parents came forward, emboldened by the Tour family's stance, to share their own children's experiences of belittling comments or unwarranted detentions. The revelations painted a troubling picture of Mr. Strickland as a teacher who habitually crossed lines, exploiting his position of authority to intimidate students he deemed inferior. Under mounting pressure from the district board, Mr. Strickland faced a formal hearing. His lawyer attempted to build a defense, suggesting that any apparent bias stemmed from strict discipline standards. Yet, as testimonials piled up, stories of personal humiliations documented discrepancies in grading, Strickland's defense crumbled. The hearing concluded with the recommendation that his teaching license be suspended. He was subsequently fired from Redwood Middle School. The news shook Thornwood. Even those who had defended Mr. Strickland initially now questioned their assumptions. The local Thornwood Tribune published a front-page story titled, "Teachers' Dismissal Sparks Call for Reforms in Local Schools." In the article, Nancy Wu wrote, "This case highlights the need for systemic safeguards against discrimination. The Tura family's refusal to remain silent has ignited a broader discussion on racial bias in education. Now unemployed, Mr. Strickland found himself facing possible civil suits. He retreated from public view, staying in a rundown motel at the edge of town, while he waited to see if the district or parents would pursue legal action. His once proud demeanor crumbled into bitterness. He spent his days vacillating between blaming the system, cursing the Tura family, and regretting his own decisions. Some nights, insomnia overtook him as he replayed the downfall in his mind, trying to pinpoint the exact moment he lost control. Meanwhile, Redwood Middle School implemented new training for its staff, focusing on cultural sensitivity and equitable disciplinary practices. Principal Ortega, shaken by the scandal, pledged to hold regular parent-teacher forums to ensure transparency. A newly formed committee, which included teachers like Ms. Palmer, parents from various backgrounds, and even a student representative planned to oversee the school's shift toward inclusivity. Kofi's life slowly returned to a semblance of normality. He was welcomed back with open arms by his classmates. A few apologized for not speaking up sooner. Miss Palmer encouraged him to join the science fair, offering resources to help him craft a project on sustainable farming methods, a topic close to his heart. Kofi dove in with renewed vigor, determined to turn this painful chapter into a stepping stone for growth. And what of Joseph Tour? He quietly returned to his city home, satisfied that the immediate injustice had been righted. But he remained involved behind the scenes, offering guidance to the local district and making donations toward scholarship funds for underprivileged students. His helicopter stunt, while dramatic, had proven effective in exposing the truth. The weight of his influence had done more than protect his grandson. It had jump-started a deeper reckoning in Thornwood, ensuring that a teacher's downfall became a pivotal moment of learning for an entire community. The day began before sunrise. Diane woke to the soft beep of her hotel alarm clock in Washington, D.C., her heart pounding faster than the hour called for. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring into the dim light filtering through the sheer hotel curtains. Today wasn't just another day. Today she would walk into the White House. She dressed with careful intention. Her dark blue dress was modest, yet graceful, with a high neckline and sleeves to the elbow. Her mother had helped her pick it out, insisting it says strength, not spectacle. Diane slipped on low-heeled pumps and a simple pearl necklace that once belonged to her grandmother. She examined her reflection one last time, brushing away a nervous tear. She didn't feel ready, but maybe no one ever really did, for something like this. At 7:00 a.m., a black SUV with government plates rolled up to the curb outside the hotel. Inside, Carl was already seated, dressed in a tailored suit that fit a little awkwardly around the gauze beneath his collar. He looked pale but determined, his eyes lighting up when he saw her. "You look presidential," he joked, voice gravelly. Diane laughed, says the man in the secret agent suit. As they drove through the still sleepy streets of D.C., past monuments and marble, Diane stared out the window and tried to calm the storm inside her. She wondered what her students would think if they could see her now. What would her father say if he were alive to witness this moment? The thought made her heart ache, but in a bittersweet way. They were ushered through White House security with practiced efficiency. Uniformed officers scanned their IDs, then guided them through metal detectors. Every corner of the property felt laced with history, polished woodwork, American flags, portraits of presidents whose faces once only lived in textbooks. Soon they reached the East Room, where the event would take place. Staff moved about, briskly, arranging chairs and checking microphones. The grand hall shimmered under golden chandeliers. Rows of seats faced a podium that stood beneath a dark blue curtain bearing the presidential seal. The air buzzed with anticipation. Carl's hands trembled slightly, and Diane reached over to gently squeeze one. "We'll get through this," she said softly. "I'm not used to people looking at me," he murmured. "They're not just looking," she reminded him. "They're seeing you now." Guests began filtering in, decorated veterans, their families, a few celebrities and political figures. Diane felt herself shrinking, wondering if she belonged. But a White House staffer approached them with warm familiarity, guiding them to seats in the front row. Then the room stilled. A hush spread like wind across wheat as the President of the United States entered from a side door. The applause was immediate, respectful, and somehow reverent. Diane stood clapping, watching in disbelief as the leader of the free world walked within feet of her. The President greeted each veteran with a handshake and brief words of thanks. When he reached Carl, he paused longer. His eyes softened as he took in the scars, the suit, the steel in Carl's posture. Carl weighed. The President said, his voice low but strong, "It's an honor." "Thank you, sir," Carl replied, his voice catching slightly. Then the President turned to Diane. "And you must be Ms. Diane Wilson." Her heart nearly stopped. She extended a hand and tried to remember how to speak. "Yes, sir. I've heard a lot about you," the President said. "Your kindness sparked something greater than you may ever fully grasp. It's a story this country needs." Diane managed a small smile. "Thank you, Mr. President. That means more than you know." As the President moved to the podium, Diane sat back down, her mind spinning. All she had done was give up her seat. How had that single act led her here? The ceremony began with formal acknowledgements, citations read aloud, short biographies shared for each honoree. Then came Carl's moment. A staffer stepped forward, reading from a note card. Staff Sergeant Carl Wade served with distinction in Afghanistan, following an IED explosion that claimed the lives of several comrades. He suffered life-altering burns over nearly half his body. Yet he fought through surgeries, trauma, and isolation. His journey of healing was marked not only by physical endurance, but by a profound encounter of compassion, mid-air. The story of Diane's act of kindness was relayed with quiet reverence. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as listeners grasped the emotional weight of what had occurred. The narrative was simple, but deeply human. A stranger choosing humanity over convenience. Carl was invited to the podium. He rose slowly, every movement deliberate. The silence was thick with anticipation. As he adjusted the microphone, he looked toward Diane. "I wasn't sure I belonged here today." He began, his voice soft but unwavering. "I've lived with these scars for years, and most days I try to disappear. But then someone like Diane Wilson comes along and sees you. Not what's broken, not what's burned, but the person still standing. She gave me more than her seat that day. She gave me dignity when I was ready to retreat from the world." Diane pressed her hand to her chest, overwhelmed. She reminded me that sometimes the greatest acts of courage aren't performed on a battlefield. They happen in quiet choices on ordinary days by people who just listen to their heart. The applause that followed was thunderous. Carl stepped down and returned to his seat beside Diane, his eyes moist. She placed a hand on his shoulder, and he leaned into it. 2 people changed, 2 lives. Forever connected, the president returned to the podium to deliver his remarks. He spoke about resilience, healing, and the spirit of everyday Americans. When he referenced Diane by name, a camera crew panned toward her, and she suddenly found herself on screens all across the country. But all she could think about was how surreal it was that her quiet instinct to be kind had brought her to this moment. The ceremony ended, but not before the president shook her hand once more and whispered, "You did something beautiful, and we're grateful." As they exited the room into the marble halls of the White House, Diane glanced back one last time. The podium stood empty now, the lights beginning to dim. "I can't believe that just happened," Carl said, stunned. Diane smiled, tears in her eyes. "Neither can I. But maybe it was always meant. To thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of courage, identity, and justice. In a world where prejudice can hide beneath polite facades, Kofi's story reminds us that standing up for what's right can bring about real change, even if it takes a dramatic helicopter arrival to make people listen. If Kofi's triumph and Mr. Strickland's downfall resonated with you, don't keep this story to yourself. Share it with friends, family, and anyone who believes in fairness and equality. By spreading the word, you become part of the vital conversation about stopping discrimination in its tracks. So if you enjoyed this story, like this video, subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories and share it with your community. Your engagement drives these messages forward, fueling hope and unity. Together, let's continue inspiring positive change, one powerful story at a time.